My advice, do not listen to the VCs. They don't know. A lot of times they don't know what they're talking about. I'm gonna,
I understand. You let that feelings out as well in LinkedIn.
I got my VC roasts. Do follow me on LinkedIn. I name and shame. I don't name and shame, but I call it bad behavior. We had a customer who ran a travel agent, and she often had to make payments to Thailand from Indonesia. But the bank that she was using here did not have Thai baht. She would have to transfer from rupiah to Sing dollar to Thai baht. Oh, wow. So we cut that out. We were able to do IDR straight to Thai baht. Exactly. More and more players are coming out to build cross-border payment infrastructure using stablecoin, and I think that's the biggest application or use case that emerged out of crypto and blockchain
infrastructure.
So cross-border payment infrastructure with stablecoin is becoming a big theme.
Hello everyone, this is Ray from Nalar Bicara. Today I'm having a very special guest, an old friend of mine, and was the founder of Wallx and now part of M-Daq. Everyone please welcome Hiro.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, bro.
No, absolutely. Pleasure to be here.
No, really amazing. It's been a while that I haven't seen you. How you been?
Yes. Been good. I mean, we're year 3 in now after the acquisition. Still growing the business, still, being aligned with the overall mission of the group. So yeah, it's been good.
Have you always been based in Singapore, or when you started Wallx, were you based in Jakarta or based in Singapore already?
Always in Singapore, but we've always looked at Singapore and Indonesia at the same time because Singapore is a smaller market, so we've always looked at how do we go into regional, how do we expand into regional from day one. That's a very good segue. It's going to my first question to you actually. Can you please share the journey on how you started Wallx to the M-Daq acquisitions? I think this is one of I would say a success story, I would say. A very small success, but so maybe I might start off with why I decided to become a founder first. Right. So before I moved to Singapore in 2012, I started my career as an engineer at a bank. Right? And then I got lucky enough to join Gree Ventures in 2012. It's called Strive now, but back then it was Gree Ventures. So early days of the startup ecosystem, right? Very nascent stages of the industry. And you as a VC, you would invest in founders like yourself, and then founders would tend to ask you for advice, right? Like, hey, Hiro, what do I do in this situation? What do I do here? But I'm like, dude, man, I've never operated a company. I've never
done this before.
Never done this before. How am I to give you advice, right? So I think I realized that empathy was one of the biggest things that I had lacked as a venture capitalist, working with founders. And then you look at the US, right? You got the Peter Thiels, the Andreessens. They've done their hard things and became investors. So it was kind of those moments where I made a decision saying, hey, if I were to ever become a better investor, or if I were to ever go back into investing, I need to go through a journey of a founder myself. Right. It's funny because I tell the story to people and they're like, dude, that's such a difficult way to become a VC.
I know. I was going to say that was like pretty much the other way around. You know what I mean? It's pretty rare to have VCs then turning into founder.
And then hopefully, so it was kind of those moments that decided to become a founder, and it could have been anything, right? It could have been e-commerce, OTA, but it just so happens that my co-founder back then was like, hey, Hiro, let's do this thing called Wallx, right? Initially more of a retail play.
A retail play?
Retail. We're thinking, hey, there's tourists coming in and out of Singapore. There's got to be a better way to exchange money, hence the name Wallet Exchange Wallx. Right? And after talking to a bunch of people, we realized that the B2B space was a bigger opportunity. So from day one, we targeted providing our services to SMEs, B2B, and so forth. Right?
Who wants to transfer the money?
Transfer money, pay suppliers, and so forth. Right. The initial years were difficult, primarily because we didn't have the license. So that was very
one of the big challenge, isn't it? Especially in the fintech business.
Especially and given that you're a regulated entity, you got to deal with regulators and so forth. Started in 2016. Managed to get through COVID. And it was in 2019-ish that we actually got to first know M-Daq. So the relationship with M-Daq started a few years before the acquisition, where we initially went to them to pitch for our Series A, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But at that time, they weren't really ready to make investments. Okay. So they said no, but hey, let's start maybe a business relationship together.
Yep.
Given that they're in B2B, more enterprise, we're in B2B as well. We did some of their payments, they did some of our FX. And once 2021 came around, they're like, hey, look, we're trying to grow bigger inorganically. Let's do. I think there's something here that we can do together, and the rest is history. The acquisition talks started from there. 2022 February, we were acquired by them.
That was amazing, man. So M-Daq has always been in the space of money transfer.
So they're primarily more FX.
FX,
right? And their client base is larger, more enterprise, like e-commerce.
And they're targeting more like in China.
Exactly. So a lot of the customers are from China. Yeah. Okay. And that's why we complemented each other, right? They had their FX arm, and we were able to do B2B payments.
Right. And at the time you were looking into Southeast Asia market, you already have a footprint within Southeast Asia?
That's right.
Okay.
I mean, we had Singapore, Indonesia, and we have Hong Kong. But Hong Kong, I think what made us quite attractive was that we had a decent market share in Indonesia when it came to B2B outbound payments, B2B outbound payments by non-banks.
Okay. So going just a little bit back to what inspired you to get to B2B payment space, right? Did you have to do a lot of pivot from the initial idea?
Yeah. So that's the thing, right? I think we weren't really changing customer behavior because customers were already sending money overseas through banks and so forth. What we did was made it easier, cheaper, and more streamlined, right? I'll take Indonesia for an example. Okay. I think this is where we made the most difference in terms of streamlining the process. Okay. Before, or even like now, I think in order to make an overseas payment, you still go to the bank, you line up, you fill in a form, and so forth, right? That's how you
painful.
It's a very painful process. So we transition all that online.
Yep.
So you don't even have to step into a bank to make an overseas transfer. We also handle currencies that some of the banks didn't even have.
Right.
I'll give you an example. Like we had a customer who ran a travel agent, and she often had to make payments to Thailand from Indonesia. But the bank that she was using here did not have Thai baht. She would have to transfer from rupiah to Sing dollar to Thai baht. Oh, wow. So we cut that out. We were able to do IDR
straight
to Thai
baht.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that saved her the conversion rate
and so
twice.
forth. Exactly. So we cut out a lot of the inefficiencies that existed in the traditional method. And brought it online to give a much better user experience.
Yeah. That's amazing. So that's always been the initial ideas when you first start Wallx. It hasn't changed from the beginning.
Exactly.
Oh wow. Okay. Because you know how it is. Sometimes you gotta figure. Okay, you have an initial ideas, and then over time you will have to kind of, I would say, iterate the ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, or even pivot. Like we've seen a lot of startups these days coming from a B2C space, and then all of the sudden
B2B
going to B2B. It's a big pivot, right? But it never happened to you.
We've always focused on B2B cross-border payments. We definitely iterated our product, and so forth, but never in the sense of pivoting the business model to like something totally different.
Totally different. Okay. Now, when you start Wallx, you mentioned that I always thought Wallx started in Indonesia, but you clarified that it's actually started in Singapore, but then you have Indonesian market as the market. But then you have Indonesian background, so I want to ask you this question, right? Is it important to have a global view from the get-go? When you start Wallx, or when you start a startup, when you start a company, is it important to have a global view as a whole? What I'm saying is, if you're an Indonesian startup founders, think of, not just Indonesian market. Think of, how can you service customers in Singapore, in Philippines, or probably the US?
This is a difficult question to answer because it's either yes and no, right? I mean, it really depends on the product or the service that you are you are
providing,
providing, and how adaptable is it when you go overseas and need to localize? Let's say if you're selling a hairdryer, you don't need to localize anything, right? You just sell abroad, right? But if you're selling a service that you need to cater for the local clientele, customer acquisition, so
tax
forth.
service, for example.
Exactly, right? Like even for us, like we got to deal with local regulators and local banking systems. Very different in each country. So I think you need to really think deeply in terms of, how you want to expand globally, if you even want to expand globally or overseas, and when the time is, right? Because if you go too early, right, you kind of like you try to do too many things at one time, and you're not focused, and you may lose market share in your hometown. Right.
Okay. So, but then your business itself is already global view in itself, because you transfer money from one country to another. So it's always been in the back of your mind that to go global.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're starting off in a smaller market like Singapore. I think when it came to our type of business, having more licenses we thought would be more valuable. So that's also another kind of part of the reason why that motivated us or drove us to expand and acquire or get licenses across the region.
Across the region. Is that turned out to be true?
Yeah, absolutely. So now we have 4 licenses in 4 countries. By end of next year, we're aiming to have another additional 2, primarily focused on ASEAN.
The Southeast Asia. Where's next? Which country?
Looking at Philippines or Vietnam.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, in terms of the trends in cross-border payments, how do you see the landscape evolving in the coming years? Obviously, probably if you're looking at today and when you first started, there must be differences, right? Well, the first question is, what's the difference now and before, and what do you think it's going to be in the next probably 5 years, let's say?
The difference between now and let's say when we started like 7-8 years ago is that back then there was no infrastructure. So people were laying down pipes, the payment rails.
Right.
So now if you wanted to start a cross-border payment company, you can just build on top of the many providers that they've already built the pipes for, right? So you can just build application layers on top of it.
That's right.
You don't have to go country by country, connect bank by bank. That's was the difficult thing that we did, and maybe our peers did. Right. So it's easier to sort of kind of start one. Although we haven't really seen any newcomers, but it's definitely much easier to start a cross-border payment company now. The biggest trend that I'm seeing, that I think will continue to evolve, is that whatever happened in Web 2 7-8 years ago is now happening in Web 3. What do I mean by that? More and more players are coming out to build cross-border payment infrastructure using stablecoin, and I think that's the biggest application or use case that emerged out of crypto and blockchain
infrastructure.
So cross-border payment infrastructure with stablecoin is becoming a big theme. There are more and more players that are building. So I think now those guys are building the infrastructure out, and I'm sure 3-4 years down the line, we're going to see a bunch of other applications that are building on top of this infrastructure.
To do the cross-border transactions using the stable coins.
Exactly.
That is interesting. Can you give me? It seems like you have passion in the space of Web3 and cryptos. Like, can you give some sort of like an example, like a real life example, right? Like, how does it look like sending money now and sending money using the infrastructure that you just mentioned in blockchains? Can you like give an example of the benefits that the customers will see once they all move into the stablecoin environment?
So there's the current method. There's two options to send money. Right. So one is, let's say if you're sending money from Indonesian rupiah to Singapore dollar. One way, which I think Wise kind of pioneered, is the netting off model, where there's no exact movement of money between the countries. You're just netting off each other.
Because the balance of
exactly. So that's one way, right? Local to local transfers, and that was a trend. That was a big trend. The second option is through SWIFT, obviously, right? But SWIFT, there are its complexities around going through correspondent banking and so forth, high fees, right? And when you make like a failed payment, it's super difficult to get back. And anyways, so that's the existing and the two ways, current ways of doing a cross-border payment. Now the stable coin, I guess one of the still larger challenges before mass adoption is the on-ramp and off-ramp. On-ramp is when you're converting fiat money, cash, into crypto, and then off-ramping is going the other way around. But once you start having all these on-ramp and off-ramp type of nodes, nexuses around different countries, the stablecoin transfer is like in seconds, costs like 10 cents for any amount, right? So I think it's gonna really disrupt or streamline the existing methods of payment, which is why SWIFT is also kind of beefing up their game, right? It used to take 2-3 days for a USD transfer. Now it's like T+0 same day, and they have this pretty cool thing where they kind of track where the money is. So I think they're also really trying to innovate and beef up their game.
So basically you're saying that they innovate after all these years because the existence of Web3 coming up.
Web3, as well as the challengers of cross-border payments and so forth.
What do you see the challenge of adoptions of the Web3 ways of money transfer?
I mean, I think there is a inherent view that crypto equals blockchain equals crypto, right? Meme coin, whatever, scam, right? And money laundering issues and so forth. So I think the banks, the regulators, and people probably need to kind of overcome that challenge, or at least mindset that this is actually there's a definite credible use case to adopt stablecoin as a means of making a payment.
Okay. So, but we'll see in the next 5 to 7 years. That's going to change.
Super exciting. I think.
Super exciting. Excellent. So let's go back to the Asia Pacific regions that Wallx is operating in. What's the unique challenges and opportunities going forward compared to other region? Say if you're looking into more Greater Asia, or you're looking to the United States, probably. What's the unique challenge that we have in here in relation to Wallx business?
For us specifically, ASEAN or even APAC is such a fragmented market. And you're dealing with controlled currencies, right? Which makes it super difficult, one, to get regulated, and two, to get money out of the country. I mean, you look at ASEAN, right? There's Vietnam, Vietnamese dong, Thai baht, Malaysian ringgit, IDR, peso. They're all restricted currencies. And it's so fragmented. You got to deal with like 5-6 different regulators.
Whereas,
one by one. Whereas in the EU, you just get one license, you get access to a whole continent.
Are you suggesting that Southeast Asia should have one currency like the euros?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't think it'll ever happen, right? In ASEAN.
That is a tough project.
And then obviously US one. Although US is also pretty challenging because you got to get a license in each state. I don't know why. But anyways, nonetheless, you're dealing with one currency, you're dealing with one country, right? Whereas here, you're dealing with multiple currencies.
And then it's probably there's a lot of countries that you have to deal with, and yet the return might not probably be commercially viable. That's the unique challenges in.
Although on the flip side, right, because it's so difficult to deal in ASEAN currencies or to get license. Once you have a strong foothold, that means you're probably like one of one or one of two, right?
So you're building moat based on that.
Exactly.
All right. It's interesting. Okay. That's from the regulation landscape. How about from customer needs and technological adoptions?
Yeah, that's also a great point because each country has different customer adoption. And like giving us our example, right? Our customers in Indonesia likes to be a bit more handheld, right? They want our salespeople to kind of deal for them. Whereas in Singapore,
sounds familiar.
they're a bit more kind of like they don't, they're a bit more self-serve, right? So they can log in themselves and then do the transaction.
That's true.
So forth. So yeah, it's very different. I think you really gotta, once again, going back to the localization point, you gotta localize for each for each region, for each country.
Yeah. Okay. And I think understanding where the technological adoption of your product is very important for each country if you ever gonna going overseas for your product. Okay. So in terms of going back to your earlier story on M-Daq acquisitions, can you more elaborate how M-Daq and Wallx strengthens positions, market foothold in the market? Like how does the dynamic works between the two?
So M-Daq is primarily, they specialize in FX, right? We specialize in B2B cross-border payment. So the thing is, whenever they went out to their customers to do the FX, their customers would ask them, hey, can you do our payments as well? Can you do the first mile collection and the last mile delivery? Because all they did was just kind of like guaranteed FX.
Okay.
Right? And they didn't have the payments arm.
Okay.
Whereas we had that. But our FX capabilities was also like, it was okay. Definitely not as strong as what M-Daq has. Right. So by combining the two, we're now able to offer a much better FX solution and also cater to the payment needs that M-Daq customers had. Right. Now the challenge here is that our customer segment size is very, very different. We're more SME, so very long tail. Okay. They're enterprise. Yes, they require the payment and FX capabilities. Yep. But because of the different sizes and customers, there's a different way to also deal with them as well, right? Some enterprises are more longer sales cycles, more complex, or a bit more easier to deal. I mean, shorter sales cycle and adoption is quicker. So the challenge initially when we got together was like, okay, how do we package M-Daq's FX solutions to be able to offer to our customers, but how do we also beef up our payment capabilities to be able to cater, to be able to accommodate M-Daq's enterprise customers? So I think we managed to sort of do that probably earlier this year.
Oh, really?
So I think we're at a point where we can now, our payment capabilities can now serve M-Daq's customers and the other way around as well.
Okay. That's amazing. So it sounds like it's a match made in heaven.
And it's crazy, right? Like some of these things, like M-Daq's founder and co-founder, Singaporean, and his co-founder is Japanese. Right? Wow. My co-founder is Singaporean and I'm Japanese. I'm like, how many more Singaporean Japanese startup duos
what
out there?
What are the odds, right?
Exactly. and in fintech, right? So that was like a very serendipitous kind of moment.
Amazing. But was when the talk, I think you mentioned like off cam just then saying that you at the beginning you worked together first.
That's right.
You worked together first before even entertaining the discussion of investments or even acquisitions, right? What was the like top 3 biggest thing at the beginning of the conversations? Was it like, we have, between the founders, we already have like the clicks, or you basically complete what we don't have? Like, what are the some of the most important thing that you have to kind of, work out? Before that's going forward, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think the validation or the conviction to do this together or us being acquired was very quick.
Yeah.
Right. And then it was more around, okay, so now how do we help? Should we become one? Once we become one, how do we help grow? So we managed. I think we really filled in like a product gap that M-Daq didn't have.
That's right.
So I think that was made very clear. Right. We complemented their capabilities and a lot of synergies were born out of that. Right. Second one was, I think, definitely culture and values. Because we worked together for a couple of years already, our teams knew each other. And we had a good working relationship. Even though it was only a subset of the people, we knew that, hey, if we actually become one, right, I don't think we will have clash in cultures or anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the third thing, this is I think super important. Right. You have to do due diligence on the buyer, on the acquirer. Right. If I mean, you know, before M-Daq, we also had other offers as well. And I think it's important that you do enough research where, you know, even if you get bought out, the company that bought you is not going to die. It's not going to run out of cash.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So we were very comfortable that M-Daq had a very, very healthy balance sheet.
Yep.
They also just raised a decent round from private equity.
Yep.
So we knew that we'd be safe, at least for the long run.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're taking a longer view by getting to know your buyer intimately.
Yeah.
Not just from the working. Yes, that's important, but also from the numbers that they provide. Okay, we got the
so product synergy, cultural fit, and obviously, you know, making
capabilities,
right?
Yeah. Excellent. I'm pretty sure a lot of founders were looking forward to finding their own M-Daq. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still there, right? I mean, it's crazy because I had a chance to speak to some founders throughout this journey, especially during the acquisition, on how their acquisition was like.
Yeah.
All right, I would say 7 out of 10 wanted to leave after 6 months. And or have left within a year.
Yep.
And so M&As don't. It's not very often that M&As work.
Yeah,
so I'm very fortunate.
I heard a lot of stories that it doesn't work.
Exactly. Right?
A lot of time it doesn't work. So you actually get the right odds of the.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
So you know, grateful for that.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So you were a VC before, and then turned of founders. There's a lot of advice coming from VCs, especially Indonesian VCs, that Indonesian startups should win Indonesia market first before they even considering going overseas. What's your take on that?
My advice: do not listen to the VCs. They don't know. A lot of times they don't know what they're talking about. you know, right?
I understand you let that feelings out as well in LinkedIn.
I got my VC roasts. Do follow me on LinkedIn. I name and shame. I don't name and shame, but I call it bad behavior. See, that's the thing, right? I think companies or startups, founders sometimes get pressured by what VCs or their investors say. And it's not always the right thing. I think sometimes they may have some useful feedback.
Yeah, like insights from the previous.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, it's your business, right? You are the ultimate decision maker to do what you think is best for the business.
Yeah.
And kind of going back into the question that you asked earlier, right? Is it the right time, right? Can my product? Do I need to localize in the markets that I want to expand into? How difficult is how
hard it is.
Exactly. So I think the ultimate decision needs to come from the founder and the management team, whether if it's if you want to focus on winning Indonesia or do you want to gonna go abroad. Right? Yeah.
That's true because I think at the end it's just a vote of confidence, right? Whether or not they want to invest in a startups that has a certain view on how they're gonna market their products. And like you said, I think the advice is just advice.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the founders will make a lot of business decisions and see what's the right fit for the business.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So, segueing on that, the funding season is kind of really slow and it's really tough these days. And it seems like fundamentals back in fashion.
Yep. Yeah.
They're starting to ask questions on, okay, what's the revenue? What's the unit economics? How did the fundraising environment different from your time back in 2016 up to 2021, 22?
Yeah.
Differ from what you're seeing now?
I mean, I think we all know that 2021, maybe early 2022.
Yeah, that was like the heyday.
Like a peak period.
That was
right?
A peak period. Yeah, zero interest rate.
Friend of mine raised like $4 million over lunch. It's crazy. Although, I mean, I must say, like, I think back then, when you were the flavor of the season, like in terms of industry, you're hot startup, whatever, it was much easier to get funding. I mean, we had challenges each round, maybe because I sucked at fundraising. but
that's pretty ironic because you were a VC before.
Exactly, right? Exactly. I was like super confident that I was able to raise, maybe borderline like arrogant.
Borderline arrogant, huh?
But anyways, so I think as long as you were sort of that set, like you were in a hot industry and so forth, chances are that you would get funded.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Back in 2000, the heydays of fundraising. Obviously now it's much more difficult. Investors are more cautious. But let's see how this turns out. I mean, it's been a long winter.
So it's been a long winter, definitely. Yeah. It's after the heyday of 21, 22, and then now up to end of 2024, it seems like no one's deploying.
Yeah, exactly.
And even though the US Fed has been cutting the interest rate, still the money hasn't flowed a lot to Indonesian startup. What would you say to the founders who are currently raising funds at this point, right? Obviously, the advice would be completely different from 21, 22, or even when you were in 2016 when you first started Wallx.
Yeah, so I think this also kind of stems from a lot of the advice that I got from Dirk, BNX. By the way, BNX is great. I mean, they give really good advice and feedback and support, right? One of the things he mentioned when we first started was like be default alive. Right? That gives you a lot of options when it comes to fundraising and being sort of keeping yourself alive for a longer period of time.
Or indefinitely, right?
And he also mentioned that time is an ally of a good company. Right?
That's true.
Because the longer you wait out, the higher the chances of survival. Right. So I think from day one, you got to be in that mindset of okay, how do I make this business default alive? Because shit will hit the fan. Right?
Definitely.
And I'm sure a lot of companies have experienced this over the last couple of years. So if you're starting a business now, think of being default alive from day one.
Okay.
Right. If you are fundraising now, right, I think the options of fundraising from VCs is a challenge, but there are the investor pool has also kind of increased.
Yeah.
Right? I think family offices are also investing. There are definitely angel syndicates that are popping up that have become a bit more popular over the last year or so. So try to tap into those kind of like investor networks besides just VC.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But what would you say? What would you show to them? Would it be different than what you showed them, say in 21, 22 cannot be the standard. I would say like probably 2016. Yeah. Would you start looking into, do I have the right business models? Do I have the right unit economics? Do I know how to make revenue? Is that something that we've got to show from day one?
Yeah, so that's the thing. I think early stage is still somewhat active, right? Without a big component of revenue in economics. I think early stage is still somewhat active. Where we are seeing challenges is the B and onwards, Series B and onwards. So I think that's where founders or companies need to adjust, right? Because back then, you seed Series A, you're in hyper growth mode. You don't care about. I mean, I'm not saying you don't care about it, but anything below OPEX is still sort of like not in your mind, right? It's all about growth. Okay. So those kind of dynamics need to change, and it really depends on how quickly can you change those dynamics. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think if you can show that transition, then you probably have a better chance of succeeding in the growth stage funding. Yeah. Or seed, yes, those things are important, and it's good to have those metrics in mind, but still can get away with a little bit of kind of like I'm scaling type of mindset. Yeah.
So that's still favorably seen by the VCs or investors that the early stage can grow as much. Okay, that's interesting. So if you were to start Wallx today, what would you do differently?
Get the licenses first, man. Oh my God,
that is something I wouldn't thought would be your answer.
Actually, there's three things. One is get the licenses first, because when we did our kind of like pre-A round before getting the license, right? People can just say no because you don't have the license. That's just an easy excuse for them. All right. So I think we probably would have spent time acquiring the licenses first with as little money and little people as possible, because you don't need a tech team or anything to get the license, right?
Okay.
As long as you have the right people, maybe a couple of people to be on the board or whatever that knows compliance, you can actually make an application.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's one. The second one is I think I would have built out my HR team much earlier. I think
HR team.
Yeah, our first HR hire was when when we were about 50 people. And a lot of founders also kind of like would probably give this feedback that when they look back, they would have probably hired their HR manager team much earlier, because I think HR takes a lot of time, right? Interviewing, hiring, and when you make the wrong hire, it's
how are you going to do with it?
Yeah. And then third one, I probably would have focused more on having a firmer foundation on our back end.
Okay.
What I mean, finance and so forth. I'm not sure if it's more relevant to us because we deal in many currencies and so forth, money coming in and out. So the finance function was a little bit behind. And we had a lot of backlog to clear. But having a solid foundations when it comes to your back office dealings, right? Auditing and so forth, will make things much easier.
So it's like an investment.
Yeah, exactly.
That needs to be done by the founders from the early on of their startups.
Yeah,
it's not becoming like, there's investors coming in, I need to get my book done.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
But then you got a 2 years backlog. What's gonna
exactly. I know it's very. I mean, as a founder, when you're growing a company, all you can think about is growth, revenue. Of course. But those kind of things should be on your mind as well. Yeah.
Okay. So let's
and they should use Ledger Owl.
yes, they should. Not coming to us when you're about to get investments. Exactly. So let's dive into each of your points just then. License. Yeah. Are you talking just from the Singaporean market perspective, or are you talking as in Indonesian as well? Because to be honest, I've seen fintech startups that get their business running first. Then license later. Yeah.
So I guess the difference as well, right? Depending on the license that you need to get.
Yeah.
And probably maybe back then it was easier to get a license than now.
True.
For example.
That's true.
Right? Excuse me. Even in Singapore. But I feel that if you're gonna be a regulated entity, doing a regulated business, that part of the component is such a big factor in how you can conduct your business.
All right. Would that affect your growth as well?
Yeah, I mean, without the license, we couldn't do any sales or marketing.
That's true.
Right. We're just bound down on waiting.
Yeah.
Right. Without being able to do much, which we did what we can. So in Singapore, just doing FX is not a licensed activity, so we try to at least show growth there. But anything else we couldn't do. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, that is my advice. It's just that we had a very painful experience of dealing, of trying to grow without the license.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just doing that waiting game.
But then it's like a chicken and egg to me. Because when you're trying to raise from VCs, would you be able to raise based on, I need your money, probably like 50% to acquire a license. So without any business backing it up, like what you gonna do with the license? Yeah,
absolutely. Right? So I think some of the investors, as long as they believe in the founders and the business model, I think we were at the right time back then. That being next to those guys invested in us because they believed that the license was just a matter of time.
That's true.
That they believed in the founders, they believed in the space and the business model, and that we could make it work. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. And then your second point about HR, I understand it's very costly. People is one of the main component to that any founders will have to fork out. How would you, if you were 10? Like how early? That's probably my first question. You're saying that your first HR person come in when you were 50 people. How early would you think? Is 50? It's too late, or we should look at maybe 20 already?
Oh, definitely. Like I think I should have hired or built out the HR function when we were about like 20 plus.
20 plus. 30, okay, so that's the number that you think of. Okay. Yeah. So when you're hiring this one person, what kind of roles that you would think that he or she needs to do?
think the generalist, right? Someone who can sort of really build the HR team from ground up. Also good at talent acquisition. Because culture and all that comes from the founders, right? That's being built.
That's not their responsibilities.
Exactly. So you need to have someone aligned with obviously your values and culture, and who can help transition that into the wider organization.
Okay.
Right?
So this person should be a generalist, not just recruiter, not just payroll.
Because you need to do everything, right?
You got to do from top to end, from onboarding to offboarding, so that's kind of things. Okay, interesting. Now the last question would be the back office, right? You mentioned earlier like it would be beneficial for founders to get their back office right from the beginning. Tell me, like, what was yours? You mentioned about financial statements, perhaps.
Absolutely. Like, oh man, when we were our first acquisition offer came in 2020, and this was during COVID, right? From a European firm. And when they started asking us or doing due diligence on our financials, oh my God, we had so much backlog to take care of. Right. Up till then, I mean, we had maybe. Sure, it was 4 years, and probably bulk of the activity came post 2018 after our license. But even then, right? Obviously, when a company is going to acquire you, they go deep, right? They have financial advisors, the Deloittes and whatever, looking at your books, and if you don't have something proper, that those conversations are going to fizzle out.
That's right.
Right, and I also think it's a testament on how responsible the founders are, and making sure everything is kind of like clean
in place.
Exactly, right? Hey, this guy is not just about growth. He, the founder, he or she is thinking about all the other functions of the organization to make sure they're up to date or they're kept up with the business growth. Right?
It's probably a good testament as well for founders. Of a good governance,
that's right.
Which is something that startups usually lack of.
I mean, you look at some of the cases, right? Like
some
the
of
CEO
the cases,
or whatever, like embezzling money.
So
I think governance becomes that's a very valid point.
It's becoming a fashion again, saying that not only growth, but it's becoming it's like a testament, like you said, for the founders itself. Interesting. So you would be investing in those in the start of the business.
I mean, I want to say you have to focus completely on it, but at least have some sort of foundation. Right?
Foundations. Excellent. Hiro, thank you so much for coming. It's been a really good conversation. And
likewise. I appreciate you having me here.
Thank you so much.